What's up, everybody? This is Charlie Potter, senior team writer with BamaOnLine.com, joined by Blake Byler, and we're here to talk some SEC Media Days. They're over now. We've gotten the order of finish, the all-SEC teams. You've had 4 days of 4 teams, kind of jam-packed in terms of just interviews and stuff like that. I will say, though, I think we're kind of in agreement here, Blake. It was pretty uneventful from the Alabama side of things. And I think if you're Kalen DeBoer and these players, this team, you got to be kind of happy with that, at least from a no headlines perspective.
No, yeah, I think it was fairly uneventful. There weren't a lot of things that weren't a lot of things that we learned. There wasn't like a big storyline that went throughout the week, really, other than the Nick Saban, is he going to return to coaching thing that Greg McElroy kind of brought upon us at the beginning of the week. But there wasn't some big storyline that went throughout the week, kind of like I remember a couple of years ago with like Saban and Jimbo. There wasn't a big event like that, but it was kind of calm. It just kind of went. It came and went. And I think, like you said, if you're Alabama, if you're Kalen DeBoer and the players, you're fine with that. And you go through, and there aren't any of these big headlines that are going to follow you into the season, but they came in, they said what they needed to. And you could see there was kind of like a quiet confidence with them going through that week. And it just feels like they're ready to get the season started.
Yeah, I think if you're Alex Thompson and Aaron Jordan, the guys over in media relations, you got to be happy with how your guys handled themselves in Atlanta for sure. You're right, though, with Greg McElroy. It's Monday morning before like even the television broadcast on SEC Network started. He kind of dropped a bomb on his radio show with Cole Kubelik and saying that people in the know have said that Nick Saban might not be finished coaching. And so I know since then, Greg's kind of walked those comments back a little bit. He said he was more so posing a question to Paul Feinbaum, who was a guest on their show, their radio show there in Birmingham. And then we've seen Kristen Saban take to Instagram and kind of refute it too. So, I mean, honestly, when the news happened, it's kind of like you have to check to see if it's one of those fake accounts anyway. Like, it just seems like I'd be shocked if it were to happen. Like, would he coach maybe his grandson's flag football team or something like that? Maybe. I mean, pray for those poor kids if that was the case. But I just don't see it happening. And, you know, I don't really remember the players getting asked about it much. They might have in the scrums in the main media room. I don't think Deontae Lawson did. You were over with Kaden Proctor. I went to the tail end of Tim Keenan. I didn't hear it. And I know Kalen DeBoer got asked about it in the electronic media room. But other than that, like the Alabama perspective, it still didn't really dominate headlines. I do know that the players, I don't think Kalen DeBoer got asked about it, but the players got asked about what the Florida State quarterback said earlier this summer. I think he was talking to Pete Nakos and, talking about how Nick Saban is no longer there and they're going to have a hard time stopping him. And I think they're probably coached up a little bit beforehand. But I think like the quote that they put out there that all disrespect will be addressed accordingly, that got some people fired up because I think some fans have been maybe a little irked or annoyed by some of the things that maybe Ryan Williams has said in interviews. And I don't really take much from that. I think he was talking about all losses and avenging them. But I think the fact that they didn't feed into the bulletin board material and then provide some more bulletin board material, you got to be pretty happy if you're Alabama.
Yeah, I agree. I think a lot of fans maybe have wanted players to talk less and maybe say less things that they feel like they need to back up. But I feel like over the week, especially with these comments from Florida State's quarterback, they just kind of took them and said, like, okay, we hear you and we're going to take care of it on the field later. Like, we don't feel like we need to talk about it right now. We don't need to make a headline about it. And I'm sure part of that was the team, the coaching staff kind of telling them not to make a big deal about it. But I also think the way that they carried themselves, I feel like they meant it. I don't feel like these are guys, like these guys that came are some of the leaders on the team. And I don't feel like they wanted to come in kind of guns blazing and say all of these things and make headlines with their quotes. I feel like they kind of took it and they said, okay, like, we hear you and we have about a month and a half to get ready to address that when the time comes instead of making a big deal out of it in front of a microphone. And I do think that really carried over too into a lot of what they were saying, not just about Florida State, but about anything. We'll get to Kaden Proctor here in a second. But when we were over there talking to him, he was talking about both himself and Alabama's offensive line and the expectations that are kind of coming with those things. The offensive line was picked by PFF as the top offensive line coming into the country in 2025. And then also somebody asked Kadyn about him being a projected first-round pick, a projected top 10 pick, or whatever it is that he is. And to both of those things, he said, we haven't proven anything yet. He said, I haven't proven anything yet. And he's kind of taking the approach of, we're going to go let our play speak for ourselves. And with the offensive line, he said, we're going to let, whenever the Joe Moore Award comes around at the end of the year, like that's what's going to do the talking for us, not what we say before the season. So from Florida State's quarterback to expectations and everything, I really do feel like this team is kind of taking the approach of, we're going to let our play speak for ourselves. And that's a little different than maybe what we've seen last year or in years prior. But I think it's a good thing. And I think it's fun to see if you're a fan, especially if you were a fan that wanted less talking and more action on the field.
Yeah, I mean, like, look, we read the BOL roundtable. We see what people say. And look, Tyler Booker's been one of my favorite players to cover because he kind of speaks from the heart. And he's a guy, too, that, like, he walks the walk. Like, he can talk the talk, but he walks the walk. And, ever since Book was able to come up and do interviews, he's kind of, made some bold claims about his offensive linemen, how they want to dominate and be the best unit in the country. And I've written tons of stories about it because he's a fantastic quote. And everybody loves to hear and talk and debate about the offensive line. But you post that on the message board, and a lot of the times people are like, I wish they would stop talking. I wish they would just prove it out on the field. So I think from a fan standpoint, and honestly from someone that posts a story and then gets all these negative comments about it, it's refreshing to hear Kadyn say those things. They haven't proven anything. And honestly, like, I understand when you have Kaden Proctor, who is a projected first-round pick, as much as he doesn't want to talk about it, coming back. You have Parker Brailsford coming back. You have Jaden Roberts coming back. There's a lot to like about this offensive line, but I'm still kind of in a wait-and-see mode. So I'm glad that he kind of took that approach because you don't know what's going to happen at left guard. Right tackle, you have Wilkin-Formby coming back, but he had a rough go early in the season, even though he kind of improved over the course of the year. It's just a situation where Alabama needs to prove it, and I think they're taking that approach. And I wanted to ask you, though, because it was a good segue to benching Proctor there, just some other takeaways from your time with him, because I know obviously his health was a question because he missed the spring, or at least he was limited during the spring. And then his weight came up also because Alabama updated its roster. I think everybody kind of goes to guys like him, maybe Ryan Williams, see how much he's gained and bulked up. And they expect Kadyn's numbers to drop, but they've been pretty consistent except for this year where they went up. He's actually listed at 366. And having seen him in person, not only in Atlanta, but earlier this summer at Wilkin-Formby's camp, he looks good. Like, he looks to be in good form. But what did he say about that and his approach to that? Not only that, but I guess his health and just really overall the offensive line. What were your takeaways from your talk with him?
Yeah, with his weight, he's up to 366, like you said, which is the heaviest he's been since he got to Alabama. And he doesn't – I mean, he looks 366, but it's more because of his height rather than, like, how big around he is. Like, he looks really good and carries his weight well. But he said he's comfortable at the weight he was at. I asked him specifically if that was the plan for him to add weight between him and the coaching staff and the training staff. And he kind of avoided that question. He didn't answer whether it was the plan or not. He did say that he felt good where he was, but he did potentially want to lose 10 to 15 pounds were the numbers he said by the time the season starts, which is interesting because he hasn't done that the entire kind of time he's been at Alabama. He said if he did drop the weight, he would be, what would he be, around 355, 350, somewhere in that range. He said he'd be moving if he dropped down to that weight. So I think he moves pretty decent as it is. Like, he moves really well for a guy the size that he is. And he said he's comfortable. So he's not in a spot where I think if he doesn't drop the weight, he's going to struggle because of the added weight, but it might be a personal preference for him to drop a little bit on the way to as we move closer to the season. But then as far as his health, he's healthy. He's ready to go for the season after missing the spring, but he was asked, interestingly, about how he's missed every spring practice so far throughout his college career. Because
chestnut checkers, man, chestnut checkers.
right, last year in the spring, he had transferred to Iowa, and then he transferred back, so he didn't participate in spring practice, and then he was hurt this spring. And one thing he said was it changes his approach throughout the summer, and he treats it like he's behind the rest. Says kind of internally he knows he has to work twice as hard, and treats it as like trying to catch up to the rest of the guys that did go through the spring, which I think is a good approach because he did miss all that time, and even though he's one of the most talented players on the team, he's one of the best players, one of the leaders, the fact that he's taking that approach and not saying, oh, I don't need spring, like I'm fine, I don't need that, like I think that's a good quality to have for him to continue to treat it that way as the season gets closer. So he's healthy. He's ready to go. The weight, we'll see kind of how that goes over the next kind of 5 or 6 weeks as we get closer to the Florida State game. He'd like to drop some, but if he doesn't, he says he's still comfortable where he is.
I don't think health was necessarily as big a concern with Proctor's weight, maybe just because of the kind of blow up we saw from fans when they saw the weight gains and subtractions. But I think one that they were really worried about was Deontae Lawson, because he suffered an ACL injury last November and the loss to Oklahoma, missed all the spring, and you kind of just wonder, when is he going to be back to 100%? And I was over with him when he was in the main media room, and he sounds like he feels really good. I know earlier this summer, Kane Walnick, Alabama's defensive coordinator, had said that he's kind of ahead of schedule in terms of where he's at in his recovery. And Lawson said, I think someone asked him how he feels on a scale of 1 to 10, and he said a 9. And so he said he's been running around doing everything that the team does this summer because of summer workouts, and he thinks he'll be ready. Now, granted, they're going to start practice on July 30th, which is exactly 1 month from the season opener at Florida State. But he might be a little limited to start things out. They're going to monitor him, though, and make sure he's ready to go for that season opener. But I would expect, number 0 to be back out there on the field. And it sounds like, talking to Kalen DeBoer, his teammates, that Deontay is really taken on a huge leadership role this offseason. And that's not surprising. He was a team captain last year. But, he's leading linebacker meetings with no coaches in there. He's gathering his guys up and coaching them up. So getting him back is huge. And then I was going to ask you, what do you feel about this inside linebacker room with Lawson back, with Justin Jefferson back? Because I know we talked about his health and everything, but throwing it over to you, just looking at this group with those guys coming back, how much better do you feel about that group maybe than you would have maybe this time a year ago projecting to the 2025 season?
Yeah, I mean, I feel great about it with where they are right now. I think it's crazy just how far along like modern medicine and technology have come along for him to have torn his ACL in late November and be potentially like ready to go full speed for the first game. It's just crazy how fast these turnarounds go now. They're just getting shorter and shorter. But I remember not even this time last year, but this time in November and December at the end of the season, we were looking around like, who is going to be left in this linebacker room? Is it going to be Caden Jones and Justin Okoronkwo, who's now at South Carolina? Is it going to be are they going to get guys out of the portal? Because we didn't know at that time if Lawson was going to be healthy, if he was going to come back. We didn't know if Justin Jefferson was going to have that extra year of eligibility. But now you get both of those guys back, who are guys with a ton of reps in the system and guys who have a ton of experience. And then on top of that, you get Nikhai Hill-Green out of the transfer portal from Colorado. So you've got 3 guys who have been in college minimum 5 years, who have a ton of snaps, a ton of reps, and that just bolsters a unit that you thought was going to potentially be your most inexperienced unit. But now it turns into one of your most experienced, and your top 3 guys all have a lot of reps under their belt. So I think that's really exciting. And the fact that Lawson is going to be close to full speed, or is going to be able to be effective, is huge, because we didn't know even a couple months ago. We thought he could maybe be taking it slow to start the season. Maybe he wouldn't even be starting the first couple games. They could take it into the bye week in week 4 and run Jefferson and Hill-Green out there to start. But the fact that you could have Lawson, who is a returning captain, your only returning captain, and a leader on this defense, your green dot guy, the guy that's going to be calling all the plays, doing the helmet communication, that guy could be on the field week 1 after not knowing if he would be able to. That's huge, and it shores up just a lot of things for not only the inside linebacker unit, but the entire defense.
Yeah, I think getting them back is big for the young guys. Like they get another year to learn from Lawson and Jefferson and now Hill Green. And like Deontae was adamant that he felt they needed to add another veteran, to that room, and that Nikai Hill Green has provided that. That's 3 fifth-year seniors that you can lean on this fall. So from a quarterback of the defense standpoint, you got to feel pretty good. And that kind of leads me into my next point is just quarterback of the offense. I know that's a huge question going into SEC Media Days. Kind of no news there. It's pretty much status quo, and they've been able to do some things this summer. Don't get them wrong, but Kalen DeBoer kind of reiterated what we heard from Ryan Grubb to end spring practice, in that if they were playing a game tomorrow, that Ty Simpson would be the starter. He's the most experienced quarterback on the roster, and he said a lot of good things about Ty Simpson. I think he said Ty throws a catchable ball like 20 times on Wednesday. I think that's a point that he's been making. And that's a good trait to have from a quarterback standpoint. And I think that he's been super consistent. It sounds like he's had a good offseason. But did you go into it? I mean, I didn't. I don't think many people did. Did you go into it expecting anything else from a quarterback standpoint? Or maybe what did you take away from everything we heard? Because we heard about just a general quarterback update. We heard what he likes about Ty Simpson. I know you wrote about that. And then the fact that they didn't add a quarterback through the portal and explaining why. Like, what were your takeaways from the quarterback position at SEC Media Days?
No, I think the staff is very confident in the room that they have, and not just Ty, but all 3 of the guys. And constantly, whenever Kalen was asked about the quarterback room, he would sometimes go down and list all 3 guys and things that he likes about not just Ty Simpson, but Austin Mack and Keelan Russell. So that's good to feel like the staff has a lot of confidence in the room, in the 3 guys that are there. As far as Ty goes, I don't think it's surprising what DeBoer said. I do think it's notable, honestly, that DeBoer kind of came out and backed what Ryan Grubb said, because when he said that, a lot of us were surprised in the media room at the end of spring that he would, openly come out and say basically like, we have a leader right now in this quarterback competition. Obviously, it's not the start of the season, but usually in quarterback competitions of the past, there wouldn't be any talk like that, especially in the spring going into the summer. So for DeBoer to say that and to back Grubb, it just kind of confirms what we thought, and it's that they trust Ty with the experience that he has, and right now it feels like his job to lose going into the fall. It's not surprising that there hasn't been any movement, so to speak, because they haven't been doing anything with pads on. They'll have workouts throughout the summer, but nothing like what they did in the spring. But he was very complimentary of Ty. He said catchable ball about 25, 30 times, like you said. But that's a good thing whenever you have this wide receiver room that's as talented as Alabama's is, with Ryan Williams, Jeremy Bernard, Isaiah Horton, and then you just kind of go down the list of weapons they have on the outside. Whoever's the quarterback, whether it's Ty or somebody else, is going to need to throw a catchable ball to be able to play and utilize all of these weapons that are around him. So really nothing new on the quarterback front necessarily, but kind of some reinforced confidence in the unit and in Ty Simpson as we move into fall camp.
Yeah, there was really not a lot of talk about the special, or not the special. I was about to say specialist. There was plenty of talk about the specialists, about the skill players on either side of the ball. It's more so like the trenches, and then of course you got quarterback talk. But I think that also exudes the confidence that Kalen DeBoer and these guys have at the receiver position and in the defensive backfield. But I did want to kind of ask you about specialists. I know you wrote about that on Thursday. Huge question mark for Alabama. We probably don't talk about that enough because you lose Jace Burnap, you lose Nealon Hibbett, you lose Graham Nicholson. So it's going to be a whole new cast of characters, kicking, punting, snapping. Connor Talty's back. We've kind of seen what he's been able to do from a kickoff standpoint, but the rest is still kind of new guys that we haven't seen a lot of because either they're new to the program or they're also new to the program and miss spring practice. So from a special team standpoint, just what were your takeaways from what Kalen DeBoer said?
Yeah, DeBoer was very upfront about, like, we lost 8 seniors or whatever it was that he said, and 3 of them were specialists, and not just specialists, but 3 of the better specialists that made one of the best units in the country. I mean, James Burnip, DeBoer openly said, was the best punter that he's ever coached.
Mm-hmm.
And so you've got to replace that guy. Graham Nicholson had not the best year, but he was a finalist for kicker of the year at one point in his career. Like, he was a really
He
good,
won the damn
solid
thing.
kicker. Oh, he did win it, of course.
Yeah. He just didn't get a lot of opportunities. I think that's fair to say.
Yeah, he didn't get a lot of opportunities. And then Nealon Hibbett was one of the better long snappers in the country. So replacing all of those guys is going to be tough. I feel like the only position where we kind of have a pulse on who is going to win it would be kicker, because Connor Talty's been in the program for 2 years now, and he was the number 2 kicker coming out of high school. He redshirted, and then last year, DeBoer talked about how doing kickoff duties and handling those kind of helped him get a stronger leg and just get more experience being on the field. And he didn't mention for the other 2 positions, for punter and long snapper, he didn't go into names. He said, we have options that we like. But then with kicker, he specifically mentioned Talty. Yeah. So it feels kind of like a given that the kicker is going to be Talty. He has the most experience, and he's kind of next in line. Punter and long snapper, we'll have to see. There are guys that they have in the program. There are guys that they brought in at both of those spots, but that's definitely an area that we're going to need to be watching going through fall camp to figure out who those guys are once the first game against Florida State comes.
I feel somewhat confident in a guy like David Byrd, who transferred from Cal. He's coming from a Power 4 program. I think he's been solid throughout his career, but he was just hurt in spring. He wasn't able to do anything. We saw him in shorts at the 8A practice. The punter, though, I think is going to be fascinating because, like you said, like, Kalen DeBoer has not shied away from praising James Burnip. Like, he's like Nick Saban's J.K. Scott. Like, he loves him some James Burnip. And you have Alex Asparuhoff as a true freshman coming in, another guy who missed all the spring because of injury. They brought in Blake Dowd from Colorado School of Mines. So they have a couple options there, but it's just TBD, I guess. Before we kind of close out here with talking about the news that came out today with the All-SEC team, the predicted order of finish, just kind of want to remind you guys to like and subscribe. Whether you're watching on YouTube, listening via podcast, we always appreciate you guys for the positive remarks you give us. And then as a way to kind of pay you back, we have a little bit of a promo code here. It's from Roback Activewear. I know I love their hoodies. I know Blake's a big fan of them too. But if you use the code BAMA20 on Roback.com, you'll get a generous 20% off for all new customers through the end of the week. That's spelled RHOBACK.com. So that's 20% off all performance polos, shorts, and more. Just use the code BAMA20. So give you guys a little bit of a nice little nugget there. But yeah, we'll close out with what we heard on Friday. I know you posted the All-SEC teams. I think Alabama had double-digit guys there. Was there anybody that maybe surprised you? First of all, I'll read off the list. So first team-wise, you had offensive line-wise, you had Jaden Roberts, Parker Brailsford. They were on the second team. Kadyn Proctor was a first-teamer. Ryan Williams, obviously, first-team wide receiver. From a defensive line standpoint, you had Tim Keenan and LT Overton on the second team. Deontae Lawson was on the second team. And then Jamani Jackson at corner was on the second team. And then from a third-team standpoint, you had Jam Miller and both safeties, Keon Sabb and Bray Hubbard. So, yeah, 11 guys. Did anybody surprise you? Maybe that was included, maybe left out? Where were you on that?
I don't think anything surprised me necessarily. I think the media. I think there was a lot of respect shown for Jaden Roberts. Second team was a nice nod for him to get. I wasn't surprised that he was on any of the teams, but if I had to guess coming in, I'd probably guess that he was third team.
Yeah.
And then also seeing both safeties get a nod, I think really tells you how good this Alabama secondary is going to be, especially with those 2 returners on the back end. But for them to both get that kind of respect, to be named preseason All-SEC when both really only played half a season last year, where Keon Sabb played the first 6 or 7 games or whatever it was, and Bray Hubbard started the rest of it. They both made enough of an impact to be names kind of at the top of people's minds going into this year. And now they'll both be healthy and playing at the same time. So that's exciting. The rest of it's not surprising. Ryan first team, Proctor first team. That's not shocking at all. The guys on second team, like maybe you could argue for a Tim Keenan to be first team, or maybe you could argue for a Parker Brailsford to be first team. But those guys being second team made perfect sense, and I think overall it all was good. I don't know if there was any omission, any player that got left off that was necessarily surprising. The fact that none of it's coming to my head just kind of emphasizes that. So yeah, I think it was solid.
Yeah, I think for me, maybe the fact that Jam Miller was included, but then I remember back because you and I filled out our bracket our poll at the same time, our ballot at the same time, and we had to pick 6 running backs. So I think just from a name recognition, that people just are going to be like, I'm going to pick the Alabama running back. I think that's a safe bet. I think Jam can have a big year, but I think they have so many backs that I think at the end of the year, it might be surprising to see one of them land on there. I'm with you, though, on the safeties. I'd expected one of them. I think I would have had some qualms if maybe neither was on the list, but I think one of Bray or Keon Sapp deserved to be on there. But the fact that both, I think, says a lot. And I agree with what you said about Jaden Roberts. So good overall showing from Alabama on the All-SEC team. And then I don't know if it's what everybody was necessarily waiting for, but the predicted order of finish. I think it played out how we expected. We talked about this when we were in Atlanta. You and I, for transparency's sake, we picked Alabama to finish second. We picked them to make the SEC championship game, which I think is completely possible. But Alabama was picked overall to finish third. So that's behind Texas, behind Georgia, Alabama third, and then LSU fourth. And those were really the only 4 teams that had double-digit votes to win the SEC championship. So it's a situation where it's kind of similar to last year a little bit. Texas and Georgia at the top, Alabama on the outside looking in. But when you look at where Alabama was picked, maybe the whole list, did anything maybe stand out to you?
No, it played out like exactly how I expected, if we're being totally honest, because I feel like the talk this entire week has kind of been how there's really 3 tiers in the SEC going in, or at least that's the perception. You have a pretty clear top 4, I think, with Texas, Georgia, Alabama, and LSU. And I've really seen people put those 4 in any order. Texas typically towards the top, but those have kind of been your top 4. And then there's a mess from like 5 to 11 or 12. And really any of those teams I feel like could finish in any order. We went back and forth, and I think when we were filling it out, we had 3 or 4 different teams we discussed putting at 5, and then we would get down to 7, 8, 9. We'd be like, do you really think like Ole Miss or Tennessee or Texas A&M, like, do you think these are going to finish this low or this high? So that's just kind of how the middle of the pack is going to be in the SEC this year, I feel like. And then like your bottom 4 teams are pretty kind of consensus. That's who people think they're going to be. So not much surprise. And I think viewing them through those tiers make kind of the middle of it make a lot more sense, because you know that people most of the time when they're voting are having these teams very close in their heads. So none of it really surprised me. I thought third, it seems fair for Alabama coming in. You know, they're one of the most talented teams in the country, but to have them behind 2 equally talented teams that were in the SEC championship a year ago, you're not going to get many complaints about that, I don't think.
No, I agree with that. And so if you haven't seen the list, here it is. This is the predicted order of finish. You had Texas 1, Georgia 2, Alabama 3, LSU 4, South Carolina 5, Florida 6, Ole Miss 7, Texas A&M 8, Tennessee 9, Oklahoma 11 or 10, Auburn 11, Missouri 12, Vanderbilt 13, Arkansas 14, Kentucky 15, and Mississippi State at the bottom at 16. I think the top 4, they do make a ton of sense. I'm probably a little higher on LSU than some. I know they lost a ton on the offensive line, but when you're returning a quarterback and one as good as Garrett Nussmeier, that accounts for something. So I definitely think it makes sense for them to be among the top 4. I think probably when the dust settles, unless you could see maybe South Carolina, picking up where they left off last year. If Florida can somehow survive their gauntlet of a schedule, some other teams. But I think that the teams that are kind of right there at the top 4 teams, those are probably the teams that are going to be vying for a playoff spot come the end of the season. So we're going to get out of here on this. Just with that in mind, we're going to be going to fall camp here in a couple weeks. It starts on July 30th, like I said before. Just what are your expectations for this team this season? I know we still have a ton of practices to go. I think they're going to have 25 or so before the Florida State game on August 30th. But now that we've had SEC Media Days, that's kind of in the rearview mirror now. What are your expectations for this team?
I think it's a really talented team, and I think there's a lot to be excited about whenever you look at, the players that were brought in, really the players that returned, and the amount of, seniors that you had come back, especially on the defensive side of the ball. And then you factor in the fact that now it's Kalen DeBoer's second year. He's had a year to kind of understand and kind of get how this thing works. And now he can really hit the ground running in this year too, with a lot of established pieces, players that want to be there and can kind of build off of it. I think the schedule's tough, and as it's going to be every year in the SEC. And I also think it's good to remember that this is a really good and talented Alabama team, but it's not the, completely separated from the pack talent-wise team that it was 7-8 years ago. So it's hard to go into a season and be like 12-0 or 11-1, especially with how kind of congested the field has become in college football. So I think it's important to remember in college football in 2025, like 10-2 is kind of the new 11-1. But I think it's fair to have high expectations for this team, to think this can be a playoff team. Like, I think that's totally fair given what's there on the team. And I think there's a lot to be excited about, especially if a couple of the right things fall into place, the right breaks go Alabama's way. If they get good quarterback play, all of those things, you could have a really good season and a really good team on your hands.
I think this team's capable of making the college football playoff. I think that's what they're striving for. I do have questions. Like, obviously quarterback is one, but can the offensive line take the next step? I think pass rush is a big question about this team. Can they get home more in the backfield in terms of applying pressure on opposing quarterbacks? Special teams is going to be one. Like, maybe that's not one that people think about a lot, but it can have an impact on the game. Like, if you have a punter that you can flip the field with in a close matchup, that says a lot. A guy that can go out there and kick a winning field goal, that says a lot. So I think there's a ton to like about this team, especially what they bring back from an experienced player standpoint, especially on the defensive side of the ball. I think that's why I'm probably more bullish than not. But if they answer the questions I have, if they come out, they look good in Tallahassee, if they can get through September and then, avenge maybe some of these losses from last year, then this team's going to be in a good spot. So I think I speak for both of us when I say we're both really looking forward to this football season. I know, we haven't been on the channel much here lately. That's because recruiting was busy. I'm sure you guys might be tired of Tim Watson and Andrew Bone at this point. So maybe this is a nice break. But we'll be doing this more often. Obviously, when fall camp starts up, we'll do some stuff. And then we'll be back on a weekly basis when the season gets here with previewing each game. So good to put a bow on SEC Media Days. Always good to see some familiar faces there at that event. But we'll be back soon. And until then, we'll see you on the next one.